Educational Practice in Early 20th Century Europe. Introduction. In this study session, you'll be introduced to the educational ideas of Maria Montessori and John Dewey. We shall also examine the implication of the educational ideas. Learning outcomes. When you have studied this session, you should be able to present the implication of Maria Montessori's educational theory and explain the philosophy of Dewey's educational ideas. Educational ideas of Maria Montessori, 1870 to 1952. Maria Montessori was an Italian physician turned educationist. She was trained at the University of Rome, and she was the first woman to hold the MD degree of the university, taking double honors in medicine and surgery. After her internship, she began a specialized study of children's diseases and was later appointed the assistant doctor at the University of Rome's psychiatric clinic. She later became a teacher of a special school for the handicapped, which provoked her interest in the development of teaching methods. Montessori was soon entrusted with the management of the childhood school for the handicapped. She was impressed with the good performance of her experimental defective children, who passed public examination designed for normal children in reading and writing. It was therefore her strong conviction that if the method experimented with physically challenged children were applied on normal children, they should produce even greater satisfaction. Maria Montessori contended that the main problem of the child is to adjust himself to his immediate environment. She considered the young learner a self-activated learner, at work in an already prepared environment of programmed materials, which encourage auto-education. She was of the view that, under the supervision of a trained teacher, the individual's development of confidence, competence, self-discipline, and readiness increases. The learner to her is like a little explorer who must have the freedom to make discoveries in his environment. Montessori believed that a series of learning games or didactic materials places the child in direct contact with the content and thus makes him free of being dependent upon direct teaching by an adult. With the freedom to discover in the prepared environment, the stage is set for the learner to discover knowledge himself, with little or no interference from the teacher. Montessori regarded the child's concentration as the key to pedagogy. The utilized educational materials must be sufficiently attractive and challenging the arrest and hold the interest of the child, and to develop his concentration. These represent what she called control of errors. Like the modern programmed materials, the didactic materials provide the learner with cues or feedback which would enable him to correct errors himself. Montessori's methodology is divided into three main parts. These are motor, sensory, and intellectual, that is, language and mathematics education. She made freedom of movement the hallmark of her method. Motor education is structured to achieve a high degree of efficiency and coordination in his movement. Through basic exercises such as walking, gymnastics, rhythmic games, and breathing, good posture and proper speech habits are developed. Sensory education involves education of the senses. The concrete educational materials are to give the learner the opportunity to touch, feel, manipulate, while there is opportunity for repeated exercises. Modern psychologists and curriculum designers emphasize the need to create an ideal and suitable environment for learning. Apart from an attractive environment, Montessori had emphasized the use of variety. She contended that the main problem of the child is to adjust himself to his immediate environment. She considered the young learner a self-activated learner at work in an already prepared environment of programmed materials, which encourage auto-education. She was of the view that under the supervision of a trained teacher, the individual's development of confidence, competence, self-discipline, and readiness increases. The learner, to her, is like a little explorer who must have the freedom to make discoveries in his environment. Educational ideas of John Dewey, 1859 to 1952. John Dewey was born on October 20, 1859, in the town of Burlington, Vermont, United States of America. He attended the University of Vermont, where he majored in philology. After teaching for a while, he enrolled in Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, from where he received his doctorate degree in 1884. Between 1884 and 1894, he lectured at the University of Michigan and Minnesota. In 1894, he accepted an invitation to the University of Chicago as a professor of philosophy, where he lectured in pedagogy, the art and science of teaching. He directed the study of education at Chicago for 10 years, where he later moved to Teachers College, Columbia University in New York, from where he retired in 1930. Dewey's two popular books, The School and Society, 1900, and The Child and the Curriculum, in 1902, were based on study sessions he delivered. The philosophy on which Dewey's view of education was based. The philosophy on which Dewey's view of education was based on pragmatism. Dewey's development of his educational ideas was dialectical. He was critical of the abundantly rigid and formal approach to education that prevailed in most American schools in the later part of the 19th century. To him, such an approach was based on the wrong psychology, in which the child was regarded as a passive being, upon which information and knowledge could be imposed. He criticized the child-oriented approach, which provided that the learner should select and pick what he wanted to learn. This approach, according to Dewey, was based on a faulty psychology, in that it did not take cognizance of the immaturity of the child's experience. According to Dewey, education should be a continuous development of immature experience towards mature experience. To him, the child is naturally an active, curious and exploring creature who learns by going. A well-designed education must be sensitive to this active dimension of human life and must guide the child in such a way that through his participation in different types of experience, his creativity and autonomy would be developed. According to Dewey, the child cannot be completely changed, nor his natural endowment completely determined. He believes that the function of education is to encourage those dispositions and habits that make up intelligence. He also emphasized the creation of the appropriate type of environment habits. When such intelligent habits have been brought out in the learner and developed, then education has performed its function. This conception of the educational process is closely related to the important role Dewey attached to good habits in human life. To him, education as a continuous reconstruction and growth of experience should also develop the moral character of the child. Virtue should be taught not by imposing values upon the child, but by cultivating in him fair-mindedness, objectively, imagination, and the courage to change his mind in the light of new experience. John Dewey regarded the school as a miniature society. It should not only reflect the nature of the society, but should also be representative of the important institutions of the society. The school, as an ideal society, is the chief instrument for carrying out social reforms. In the controlled environment of the school, it is possible to encourage the development of the creative individuals who will be able to work effectively to eliminate evils and for the common progress of the society. The school, therefore, is the medium for developing the set of intelligent habits required for the growth of the society. Dewey saw unplanned technological, economic, and political developments as dangerous to the future of democracy. Such unplanned programs will increase human alienation and undermine the shared reasonability, which is very essential for democratic community. Thus, Dewey placed so much importance on the function of education in the democratic society. To him, the school is the most important tool for strengthening and developing a genuine democratic community, and the function of democracy is forever the establishment of a free and more humane experience in which all share and participate. Implications of Dewey's educational ideas. Dewey's educational ideas have been most beneficial to modern educational practices. His ideas and proposal strongly influenced United States education. Most of his ideas were shared by the progressive movement in education. His criticism of the rigid and formal approach to education is not only a legacy to American education, but also to the rest of the world. Today, in most countries, considerable emphasis is being laid on the need to de-emphasize the imposition of knowledge and information on the child. Rather, there should be some measure of flexibility to allow the child to discover knowledge himself. His criticism of the child choosing what he wants to learn himself is also important to modern educational practice. This criticism stresses the need for the child's immature experience to be guided towards mature experience. This idea has also given rise to the emphasis being placed on the role of guidance and counseling in modern educational practice to guide and nurture the child's immature experience to mature experience and for the full realization of his individuality. Dewey's educational ideas, which are based on the philosophy of pragmatism and the slogan of "learn by doing," is basic to modern educational practices. In most schools today, reducing the learner to a mere passive listener in the learning process is de-emphasized, while tremendous efforts are being made to make the classroom learning process activity dominated and the child an active participant in the learning process. It was Dewey's idea that education should encourage habits and dispositions that make up intelligence, and that there was the need to create the proper environmental conditions to nurture these habits. Modern educationists emphasize the need for the right type of environment, both physical and psychological, to nurture the child's intelligence. Emphasis is being laid on giving schools an aesthetic consideration, sitting schools in places free of distractions, and giving the teacher the essential psychological comfort. According to Dewey, education should develop the moral character of the child. This idea of the function of education has greatly influenced modern educators, who now emphasize that the function of education is not only to develop intellectualism, but also to produce intellectuals who will be morally acceptable to the society. Education should not be for producing learners who will only be a success in the classroom, but a failure in the society. Education, therefore, has a two-dimensional functions, that of changing positively not only the intellectual outlook of the learner, but also his psychosocial competencies. Dewey believed that the school is a miniature society and that it should be an instrument of social reform, an instrument for perpetuating all those values cherished by the society. Most schools today serve this most important role. The inculcation of those cherished values is greatly emphasized in the schools. The school also serves as an industry for rolling out individuals who will use their knowledge and experiences to bring about positive changes for the common good of the society. However, John Dewey could be criticized for his great concern for process and growth, and his insistence on the experimental or scientific approach to social, ethical, and philosophical problems. Dewey's emphasis on experiments and his neglect of theory appears to be faulty, because Dewey seemed to ignore the fact that the experiments and empirical researches are theoretically derived. Experiments are carried out on the basis of certain fundamental theories and hypotheses. By rejecting theories which he regarded as speculations, Dewey seemed to have thrown overboard a fundamental element of the whole experimental process. His experimental approach to ethical, social, and philosophical problems is wrong, since social and philosophical issues cannot be taken to the laboratory in search of solution. In spite of these shortcomings, however, Dewey has remained one of the greatest and most influential educational philosophers the world has ever produced. His educational ideas greatly revolutionized his own world, and most of them are still indispensable legacies to modern educational practices. Study session summary. In this study session, we have learned Montessori and Dewey's ideas on education. Montessori divided methodology into three, namely motor, sensory, and intellectual. She believed that the three aspects of her methodology should be emphasized in giving the child an all-round development in education. The philosophy of Dewey's view of education was pragmatic. Dewey's development of his educational idea was dialectical. He criticized the child-oriented approach, which provided that the learner should select and pick what he wanted to learn. To him, education as a continuous reconstruction and growth of experience should also develop the moral character of the child. End of study session 10. Thank you for listening.